Again in studio, this time about different type of psychology, but also programming. The programming can also hurt people if you do not program it well. So you must use some sort of more healthy version of Java, or simply the Java microends together with healthy practice. There are different models of the Python and C++, but also some people like to compete in programming, and that's not well. It's much better to build some sort of therapy for all people that code, or also for all people in your company. It is better that 100 people serve simple brand that provide therapy than the other competitive forums that are very, very destructive in the way emotions work in life. Psychological coding is very important for health, and it's very important to understand simple form of the science together with the ethics of book. Without that, it's very hard to understand anything and to build better United States or Europe. It's not easy to understand that expressions can also hurt other people or completely destroy personality, like very known people in world that do not do a lot for a better living of other people or for the better language. The language of English, of course, includes millions of different forms of English, and it's not simple to understand lower and higher levels of English. There is also a lot of sisters and brothers in English. And of course, if you are looking for some advanced level in programming, you must look for the Java microends or also the designers of C++ and other forms that go together with Studio. The network programming is not simple because it also 100% serve the finance. And of course, the entire internet if you provide some extra information, but sometimes information do not work. If information do not work, you must also think about the other forms of the language together with the code. There are a lot of symbols together with parallel microends, but also other forms of programming that are possible to build healthier site and not some sort of commercial problems. The commercial things a lot of time can have a lot of problems also with the healthy structure or unhealthy slogans. You might see a lot of drinking brands that have disorder in health, especially alcoholic brands. It's very important to build programming language that actually serve all the brands but also keep the distance from all type of unhealthy logos. The variable menu that is possible to do in simple forms also serve the different form of interface, but it's very important to build the simple number and not to hide in any type of computer contract. The parallel, of course, is much different than C++, and that's the other form of approach. If you have a much bigger team, of course, you can use it for a different type of purpose, but that's not simple because sometimes all the people want the same. The same is not the best way, and you must build a different language, which of course include also the different type of people and the different people react different on the same problem. The ambition, of course, it's not the best way to solve different forms of the wallets and building better cPanels. The PHP, of course, can serve the basic purpose together with the wallet and the entire server. The structure usually is very complex when it comes to server, but you also need to build some sort of security line together with administration or politics, especially if you are working in health system. It's very important to build simple forms of Linux if you are building together with field microents, but also if you are using Ubuntu, that's not a bad idea. If you are using cPanel a lot, together with the wallets and cPanel, you can also build the different tokens. And those builded tokens are actually quite important if you are going to build the items on the app. The software, of course, is not app and server, but it can serve both of those. Microent's desktop, it's not simple, but it's actually just an extension of the simple form of the Linux, and that's not a secret. The Ubuntu, of course, it's some sort of classical version. It is the AAA Microent certificate, and probably you can afford it for a simple price. Do not think that that's anyhow related to any type of law, because it's just a simple certification in technology. Hosting and managing different forms of code is not simple, but there are also different forms of web service you can use. It is very complex to understand the whole Ubuntu, but of course, if you understand simple forms of Linux, it's very important that you build that on the website also to some point, but of course, you can also turn it off if anything might go wrong. The Unix, it's not simple, and to serve the population around the world or in your city, it's also not simple. You can also select just few city and serve those city, and you can also block some city, which is sometimes the most important for the evolution. There is no education in computer science because it's too complicated, and the applications, of course, are very destructive if you are looking for something more than simple friends. Usually, it's very important to build simple forum of standards, but also limitations for the social forums and over political dimensions. The Ubuntu, of course, is not political, and it serves the simple forums for the evolution inside the microents, but nothing else. If you are looking for anything else, please turn on other film or outside this film. This film, of course, is limited, but if you have enough imagination, of course, you can also imagine the better security and how the world could be built together better with the Linux distributions. It's not easy to clear any type of very complex disease, and probably there will be also millions of software that are healing software and the internet, and that sometimes takes some time to build that properly. The microents is also part of simple forum to build better forums in the internet. If you are looking for the healthier servers, you should use Dell. The Dell is actually the simple form of technology, and it develops simple forms of the servers. It is not easy to build the form of the storage that is going to serve your company or the brand, but it's also some sort of networking safety if you use the Dell. Of course, the Linux might also build simple forums across the world, but it ends very soon if you do not build your own brand. So your own brand is actually very important. To build simple forums together with the market share is actually extremely difficult, and there are different type of games and markets, so it's very difficult to insist there in anything. Beyond the computers, of course, there are also other graphical elements, and it's not easy to understand the interaction between the computers and the markets. But of course, you can also use different forums for the computers or to build better computers programs. Sometimes people think too much about what is possible or what you should develop more, but sometimes you should just develop more and more ethics. The ethics are very important, and ethics also can build better and more healthy therapy. Sometimes that therapy also, of course, it's sound, but usually the best is just to turn off all the sound and all the nonsense and just work. The psychiatry, of course, is not simple, also mentioned in a book, Me Made Simple. If you do not see that, you will also see that your mental health with me is not going to be simple. Working together with different professionals, it's not easy, especially with different form of clinical associations. Those are some sort of social workers, and they build some sort of therapy for different type of users. Me also serve the simple clinic of Taoism, which is much more different than 90% of the clinics. It's very important to build ethical psychotherapy and not any type of mental disorders that music might have. The psychotherapy is very important, but of course, it's also not simple to understand simple form of the health commissions. In world, there are different forms of certification, and of course, BBB microRNA certification is also very simple. Sometimes you need more certification, and sometimes you just must look for simple health. The simple health clinics are probably some sort of meditation gardens, and of course, are much more simple than humans could imagine. And that's why this movie have extra value, because sometimes you must build extra value if you want to be extra valuable for other scientists. Different forms of institutions, of course, can also support different forms of coding events, but it's much more important to build a private ethics for your company. So any type of your affairs is going to be more and more simple. Having a simple Java standards is very important, and those will not be corrupted until you are going to mess it together with extreme complex biology or biomedical things. But of course, that area of science is extremely complex, and it sometimes relates to more of the departments. The coding should be simple form of science and should not build too much status, because if you are building the status, there should also be the openness and ethics that most of people do not have. Some sort of openness is also important in everyday of life, but in everyday of life you also sometimes close to some people not to hurt yourself. And of course, you can open to some other people or leaders that are looking for an extra philosophy or how to build the better life. It's not easy to have the proper mentality once you understand simple forms of news, but it's also usually very good to look into the history and build some sort of simple form of the book or the puzzle for the others, so other can also think about the ethics and understand why some items are more valuable or why it is worth to build a better science. The science and different forms of institutions are not simple, but it's very, very important to build simple C++ for different programs. The virtual machine, after all, it's not simple. And when you relate this to different forms of programming, that can become very dynamic field. And it's very important to build simple code, which is actually usually very object oriented, like you see on the picture on the first, on the beginning of this film. There are different forms of the handling with different forms of exceptions, especially when it comes to users like a woman's, and probably you should put that in a simple fashion field. Different forms of standards applies when it comes to coding with different users, and of course different forms of instruction for Java microints. But of course there is also a question how to build simple setting for C++. There are different forms of the language, and to build simple forms of the program is also important together with the simple forms of trending. The trends in software actually do not exist, and most of people is going to mess that together with the application, but software is also very important. There is also different forms of main functions that exist together with different forms of studios, but of course the Macarena Studio is extremely simple language and not very complex, but maybe for some people also very complex if you do not have the right certifications. Actually, sometimes it's very important to build simple form of the C++, but of course you can also go together with Java. There are also different forms of BASIC, but also together with JavaScript. There are different forms of effects that the DOS could make, and different declarations of the forum. The variable forms of the trends are not simple and how to build the value together with the code or applications. And different programmers, of course, have different interests. There are also different forms of arrays together with C++, but it's not easy to build that in a simple structure to build simple applications for whatever you are going to do. The overall picture of any type of complex coding is not simple, but it is also not simple to build simple graphs. The graphs are also very complex, and on the edge, they could cause millions of problems. Sometimes it's not easy to build forums code to code simply, so you can also use different forms of cell, and those can be even dangerous if you use them wrong. Sometimes also the algorithms, but most of the time you should really ignore the algorithms because the ethics are more important. If you are looking for more and more medicine, of course, you could also look for the health psychology, occupational psychologists, the practitioners, the simple psychologists, orthoists, prosthetists, radiographics, therapeutics, simple speech and language therapists, of course, also the speech therapists for English, or how to be better in more open areas. There are also the music therapists, which are extremely difficult, or even drama therapists. There, of course, are also the therapists that heals people that are in art or have different disorders with reality. So, for people that are coding, me also recommend simple forum of self spa or simple forums of help for self.